Hello here, and welcome again to another edition of the HuskerOnline Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washut. I hate to say it, guys, we're in the offseason.
Jeez, thanks a lot.
Once again,
it comes at you hard. I mean, you know that Thanksgiving week is a lot to get crammed in to cover a game Friday.
Yeah,
you have your Thanksgiving, and here we are Tuesday after the season in the offseason. But as they've called it now, it's silly season in college football between coaching changes, assistant coach changes, but the transfer portal. And that's what's going on right now for Nebraska and every coach in the country. This week is a dead period in recruiting. So Matt Rule will meet with his entire team Monday through Thursday, which is the recruiting dead period. Then starting on December 1st, Friday, the coaches can go out for 16 days and conduct in-home visits, school visits, with seniors and also transfer portal targets. So it's going to get hot and heavy. Great time as well to try out HuskerOnline.com. We do have a great special for our YouTube viewers here. Get 2 months, not just one, 2 months for $1 by using promo code NU1. That's a special promo we've got right now. So check that out, guys. But man, I just don't know where to start with the offseason discussion and the quarterback approach and where things go, because the transfer portal will open officially on Monday.
You can start every conversation right now with Nebraska's quarterback situation, because that's, I mean, come on, that's what they weren't a bad team this year. They lost a lot of guys on offense early, August and September, but they had a good shot to be a bowl team, and it wasn't because the quarterback play. I mean, that's it.
It was in spite of the quarterback play.
Yeah, this team did a pretty good job to get where it was, but they had, Matt Rule and Satterfield, Marcus, have to get this quarterback room squared away to where it's not a liability. It can be something that drives the team forward, not backward.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Is that fair, Sean?
No, it's the most important position in sports for a reason.
Yep.
Nebraska needs one, or they got to figure out what they're going to do there.
You see it all over the place. You see it in pros. You see franchises, NFL franchises dragged back by quarterback play.
As a New York Giants fan, I can firmly relate to this. Yes.
Well, and I think it's really hard to wrap your arms around the situation at Nebraska, because they thought they had their guy, Jeff Sims, and it was a disaster. I mean, let's call it what it is. Jeff Sims.
Ooh, that's harsh.
With the NIL money.
That's not untrue.
And the turnover situation, the way the first two games started out, it was a disaster. Heinrich Harburg was able to stabilize the season, get it going. He made mistakes, but they ended up not being costly. And then he gets hurt, gets banged up because of his style, and then they go to Chubba Purdy. It's just really hard to make a case. Chubba, of the three, I think Chubba Purdy's the one you're like, all right, with more development and him getting healthy, that's the guy. But you still have to get a portal guy. And if you get a portal guy, what does that do to the other guys in the room? What is the future of Jeff Sims? I don't think anybody really knows that right now. Does Jeff Sims move on? He's got to graduate. He's got to get that degree in December. So when they put out those lists on who graduates, that's a big one to watch. And by the way, Chubba Purdy does graduate as well in December, which would make him eligible to be a double transfer, because he's already transferred once.
Yeah, you just got to wonder if they do go the portal route, which I think we all expect. Like, how heavily do they dive into the portal? Do they do it like they did last year and go and handpick a guy and say, here's the keys to the car. It's your team now. It backfired on him in a big way last year. And then you have 3 guys currently on the roster with starting experience.
That's fascinating.
That all,
it's fascinating.
I guess a part of winning teams, or winning games. So that makes it a very interesting dynamic, where I think the first dominoes that need to fall is who's going to come back and what are you going to do with Jeff Sims. And when you do go get your portal guy, how many of the other guys are going to, Harburg or Purdy, are going to want to stick it out and continue to compete when they could probably go find somewhere where they have a clear path to a starting job.
Again, no, Power 5?
Maybe not. You saw what happened with the last guys that left. Casey Thompson didn't even get Power 5.
He didn't.
No, you better be pretty proven with numbers and data. Of the ones, I think Purdy would be the one, because he's got some good film late.
He's got the name.
And he's got the name. So there's going to be some fascination, but I don't think Heinrich Harburg could just go to another Power 5. No. And
he'd be Logan Smothers.
And I obviously Jeff Sims, I think his options will be limited. I mean, if
the book's out on him right now.
I mean, his stats are remarkable. I mean, 6 interceptions and 47 passes. That you can go through, and I've seen it. I've seen the stats. You can go through thousands of quarterbacks, and you don't see it. You see it once or twice out of thousands.
47 times in a game without a pick.
Right.
Think how far that Colorado game. Just think how fast it fell apart.
Yeah.
Like as Nebraska was laying quote body blows, you and I nudged each other and we're like,
I said, they're getting it going.
They're getting it going. Gabe Ervin, and all of a sudden he turned it over and just the way the Minnesota game ended.
Blew up the game.
And that's, hey, the difference from Nebraska is that much. Look, who was the last team to get the bowl spot at 5-7? Minnesota. Who beat Nebraska 13-10 on a last-second field goal? Minnesota. That's how close Nebraska is.
I know, but I wouldn't hang
they're
your hat
on that cliff. They're on that cliff right now.
They are.
3 13-10 losses on last-second field goals is what kept Nebraska from going to a bowl game. One of those 3.
Yeah, one thing we disagree on staunchly, Sean, is 5-7 bowl teams. I don't.
No, I'm saying they should have got to 6. They should have got to 6, and Minnesota's sitting at home.
I'll buy that.
And their quarterback, by the way, I won't even try to get his last name right.
Ethan Kaliakmanis
is in the transfer portal.
How about that? He's not that bad. I mean, I'd give him a look.
Mm-hmm.
In Minnesota, something doesn't feel right in Minneapolis either. PJ Fleck, with the Big Ten West going away, the lack of NIL at Minnesota compared to other teams in this league.
It doesn't feel right. You're right. I think Fleck would get out of there if he could.
Because if you're not equipped with NIL, luckily Nebraska is. They've got a very good NIL situation going on right now.
Yeah, 5-7 won't get Fleck out of there. But I think if he would have won 9 or 10, I think he would have moved on. Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, I'm not saying that independently of hearing things. I mean, I talk to people like you guys do, but 5-7, he's stuck there.
And going to the quarterback conversation, Nebraska is looking for a quarterback in the transfer portal. Well, so is pretty much every other team in the country right now.
Right.
And there's a bunch of teams with resources that can make promises and pay a bunch of money to go get those guys. So it's, Sean always makes the comparison. It's not like you're going grocery shopping where you can just get I want this quarterback. No, that quarterback wants to pick you.
Right. And this begs a question. How much anymore, if you were a head coach, if you were running a program, would you hire an offensive coordinator and then ask him, now, how do you have connections to quarterbacks? I mean, because if you're a coordinator, a quarterbacks coach with no connections to quarterbacks and you're just relying on traditional recruiting, it feels tenuous to me.
You're
like
behind.
If you could go to Satterfield and say, hey, what do you got? You got some guys? Mm-hmm. That would be great. Because there are coordinators, I'm telling you, and Sean knows this, there are coordinators out there that can say, yeah, if you hire me, I can bring a guy, or I can bring 2 guys. But I think as in this new world we're in college football, connections to talent are critical.
Well, how much, if you take a guy, how many guys will that cost you on your current roster? And are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's another.
Are you okay with an eye for an eye? Yeah. Or in some cases, an eye for 2 eyes. Mm-hmm. Like you might lose 2 quarterbacks for 1.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to start.
I know it's
not easy. I mean,
you know what you hope? God dang, I'm going to say something that's going to drive you crazy. I would hope that Chubba could become the guy. You got him on campus. He knows the offense. He knows the personnel around him. He's a 3rd-year guy in the program. I just would hope that you could develop him like the Broncos' new staff has developed Russ Wilson. Went from 16 to 11 touchdown to interception ratio to 20-4, mainly because they dialed things back and coached him up and made him get rid of some parts of his game. Can you do that? Can you just coach? Can you coach Chubba up and say, look, you got to have a big off season because we need you. We also, though, are bringing in a guy. Now, I don't know if you can do that because it seems like when you bring in a guy, you got to make certain promises to him in terms of first team reps. Man, it gets complicated. I mean, it's a really tricky wire you have to walk as a head coach.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the coaching staff and are there some shakeups we could see? Could Matt Rule kind of move some chess pieces around, so to speak, as he builds his year 2 version of Nebraska? We'll hit on that. And we are going to talk some volleyball. Abby Barmore will get us ready for the NCAA tournament, and Robin Washett will get us ready for Creighton and Nebraska on Sunday. That's all next on this week's edition of the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. Before we get into some more football discussion here, this segment of the Husker Online Show brought to you by Omaha Steaks. They've got a great thing right now with Black Friday and Cyber Monday this week. 50% off site-wide, plus an additional $30 off with promo code Husker at checkout. And let me tell you, who doesn't like steaks? I mean, I can tell you, if I sent Steve Sipple a box of filet mignons from Omaha Steaks, game over.
Oh, it's one of the best. This is one of the best gifts imaginable. It is. It's easy to get. They ship it to you, and there's your gift. You get it for 5 different people in your family.
When I will say, in their company president, CEO, a college friend of mine, Nate Rempe, a big Husker
dropping names
fan.
Over there, Sean.
Hey, he's a season ticket holder at Nebraska basketball fan. So, their Omaha Steaks are a worldwide company.
God, look at that.
But great holiday deals. You cannot go wrong. And it's more than just steaks, too. I mean, you can get desserts, side items, chicken, pork.
Yeah.
But the steaks, we actually cooked some bacon wrap sirloins the other night, and Lisa's like, "Where are these steaks from?" I go, Omaha Steaks.
They're legit.
I mean, they were really, really good steaks. So once again, 50% off right now, site wide, plus an additional $30 off with promo code Husker when you check out at omahasteaks.com. Thank you again to Omaha Steaks for sponsoring us here over the holiday season on the Husker Online Show. Okay, let's get in that staff discussion because I think we're all fascinated by this. There's a few things that we're watching. Obviously, Tony White is a name that's been up for some jobs. Syracuse is going to hire Fran Brown, who also coincidentally is a Matt Rule disciple.
Fran Brown.
He's the guy that led Matt Rule to a lot of those Georgia Bulldog players.
Okay, Syracuse going to hire him?
Yes.
Is that right?
So Syracuse,
they nailed that down already?
Well, it's been reported that he's the guy.
Really?
I don't know if they've announced.
Brown, younger guy, right?
I don't know if they've announced as a school, but really, really good assistant coach. Happens to also be a Matt Rule disciple with Northeast ties. So now that leaves Tony White. We know he's interviewed at San Diego State. That's been reported by the San Diego Union Tribune.
That's correct, Sean.
Did I get my newspaper right there?
You did. Good job.
A couple holiday bowls, read those in some hotel lobbies over the years.
Yep.
But Tony White interviewing at San Diego State. And then the other thing I'm watching, guys, is Josh Martin, tight ends coach. What will happen with that? He's in the interim tag. Will they bump him up to full, or will Rule use that Bob Wager situation from August as an opportunity to maybe kind of do a little shuffling?
Shuffling meaning perhaps. Oh, well, I mean, what? Come on, let's say what's on everybody's
question
mind.
For the highly paid columnist.
Yeah, I mean, what's on everybody's mind is maybe you shuffle and try to find a quarterbacks coach, and you shift. It's an easy shift Marcus Satterfield to offensive coordinator / tight ends instead of offensive coordinator / quarterbacks. It's not unfair to suggest. It's not unfair for it to be analyzed because of Nebraska's immense problems with turnovers from the quarterback position. I mean, you really got to look at it. I'm almost to a point where I just say you got to make a change. Yeah. I hate it because I think Satterfield has good intentions. I think he's a good coach, but I would call it a pretty epic failure this year in the turnover category. Nebraska leads the country with 31, and most of them come from quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a remarkable situation. Usually remarkable situations lead to change.
Well, and the fact that it was, all 3 quarterbacks struggle with the same issue. So what's the one common denominator?
Right.
It's coaching.
Well, Rule said that himself.
Yeah. And so, Rule, obviously he's the guy that always says, put the blame on me, but your OC is the guy supposed to be working with the quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. So that's a direct reflection on his work. And so if you have that opportunity, I think to maybe take some of that off Satterfield's plate, maybe where you can focus some more on some bigger picture offensive things and have someone completely dialed into working with those quarterbacks, working on their mechanics and their decision making with the football, both holding on to it and where they throw it. That might be the best case scenario as far as potential reshuffling, as we say, of this offensive staff.
Well, what about the play calling duties? So it'd be one thing because number one, Marcus Satterfield makes $1.4 million on a 3-year contract, guaranteed. So he's locked into a contract. So I can't imagine that being changed. So would you, if you did something like this, would you do co-coordinators?
I don't think so. I wouldn't.
Or would you just keep Satterfield as a coordinator, have him work with tight ends?
That's what I would do. Here's the deal.
Now, Josh Martin theoretically could still stay here.
Right.
And just go back to the analyst role.
Here's the deal. This is where you have to defend Satterfield a little bit. The whole thing.
The injuries.
The injuries and what he had to work with. Even before that long list of injuries started in August and September, we didn't think Nebraska was all that gifted personnel-wise. And then they got hit by injuries. So Satterfield, if you're defending him, you would say, well, what did he have to work with?
Yeah.
And some of those turnovers are just a product of not having much to work with. These weren't his quarterback. Well, Sims was. That's a huge strike against Satterfield. Yeah, Sims, Jeff, is a huge strike against Marcus Satterfield and Rule.
Yeah, that was their guy, Jeff Collins, that suggested or
Georgia
led them.
Tech, yeah.
And were there other quarterbacks even in discussion, or did all the chips go right to Jeff Sims?
And do you remember, you guys, you got to think back. They sold him really well. They sold Jeff Sims really well. I mean, I recall that conversation we had in Belton, Texas with Satterfield, where he was very convincing about Sims' ability and the strides he has made. It was, and that's what you do. I get it. That's what you do as a coach generally, but you don't have to be as complimentary as Satterfield was. You don't have, you can dial it back a little bit. He wasn't dialing anything back. And maybe I always thought in the back of my mind was maybe what he's doing is through the media trying to bolster Sims' confidence, knowing that he's had issues. And maybe if we just pump him full of confidence, that can help.
Maybe that's a lesson learned on his end too,
right?
Where everything you say in front of a microphone or otherwise here at Nebraska is going to be blown up to epic proportions.
And it was
one way or the other. And
they also saw enough from Sims to tell Casey Thompson that you're not going to get a great look if you stick around. I mean, he didn't like what he heard, right, Rob?
I don't think so. That's a hard one to get a whole hand on.
Well,
did he just leave on his own accord? Is what I'm Casey. Did he just say I'm out?
My read has always been Casey wanted, some assurances that he was going to have an opportunity. Now, Casey Thompson got hurt. He was out for the season anyway. So, they wanted a runner. They wanted a physical guy that could run because they knew their limitations already on offense, even before the injuries. So they thought the quarterback run game would help them to an extent. And Casey couldn't really execute that physically.
No,
he could do it for a game or two, but could he have gone 12 games with the hits those quarterbacks took?
Think of the hits.
No.
Think of the hits that Harburg took. And could Casey take those at his size and his injury history? I don't. Well,
Casey took a shoulder injury and he played through it.
Here's the deal, though. They wouldn't be running Casey Thompson like they did Harburg. You talk about the limitations. They had to run Harburg like that because he was so limited as a thrower. And when you think about what this offense was this season, it was 3 different schemes. They had a scheme with Jeff Sims and what he could do. They had a scheme with Harburg and what he can do. And they had a scheme with Purdy for what he could do. And all were extremely limited in one way or another. So if you want to go back to defending Satterfield and Rule with how they called plays this season, a lot of it had to do with what they could and could not do with 3 different quarterbacks over the course of 12 games.
It's only fair. It's only fair to consider that when you're talking about Satterfield. But what I've done is make the distinction between Satterfield as the play caller and Satterfield as the quarterback's coach. And Satterfield, I'd make the distinction because of the turnovers. You couldn't get that under control. I mean, it's just surprising to me. It never got under control right to the end, and it cost them dearly in those last 4 games. In the last 4 games, turnovers killed them.
All right, when we come back, we will discuss and get you ready for Nebraska basketball versus Creighton. The Huskers are off to a 7-0 start. Rob, their best start since 91-92?
92-93.
92-93.
Close.
91-92 was the outstanding year they had, right? The really, really good year. When
they were 26-8 in 90-91. I can't remember what they were in 91-92. But yes, that run was
Rich King,
the highlight of the program.
Well, they got off to in 1991. They got off to an incredible start.
Mhm.
I think Murray State, and this is where my freak memory comes into play, beat them. And that was like their only early loss.
I don't know that.
It's only the fifth time in program history they've ever been 7-0.
Murray State had a guy, I believe, named Popeye Jones back in the day.
Good God, Sean.
I'm just showing off here, but
yeah,
on that
you're
note,
just running up the score now.
When we come back, you're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washut. Before we get into some Creighton, Nebraska basketball talk, this segment of the Husker Online Show brought to you by nuts.com. And let me tell you, if you're looking just to order snacks for your house, your office, holiday parties, we're hooked. I mean, we've pretty much cleared out all the nuts.com that's been brought to our office already. I did make my own order. I got more coming this week, guys, because they had a great special on nuts.com.
Get some of that dark chocolate
for Cyber Monday this week and Black Friday.
See that sea salt, dark chocolate sea salt?
Well, I did a basket. So I did like this giant gift basket because it was on special and it was 40% off.
Sounds good, but look at the dark chocolate sea salt.
I think they're going to be in the basket.
Okay.
Like this basket's got like 30 things coming.
Let's ramp it up, Sean.
My only request, Steve Sipple, open the bag properly.
Yeah. Not like an animal.
Yes.
They have reusable.
Oh, come on, Rob.
There's a civilized way of doing it.
Okay.
Don't tear open with your teeth the whole bag.
It's like
bless you.
It's like a possum digging through.
Yeah, like a possum.
But we got to deal with nuts.com as well. If you just
angry possum
and simply use go to nuts.com/Husker. And if you order $29 or more, they will throw in free shipping and a free gift as well, a free bag of products. So that's nuts.com/Husker for free shipping and a free gift. Check them out. They're a proud sponsor here of the Husker Online Show. All right, Rob, let's get into the Creighton, Nebraska basketball game because it's intriguing. I mean, I think Nebraska actually received votes in the poll this week.
One vote.
One guy voted them at what?
22, which awarded them 4 points. So there's confusion. They didn't receive 4 votes. They had one guy vote for them inside the top 25, which counted for 4 points. But they received a vote for the top 25.
When's the last time there were some times under Miles that probably were close?
Oh yeah, the beginning of his last season,
2018-19,
season
when they went there.
After they beat up on Creighton and Oklahoma State, they were top 25.
Oh, they were in it.
Yeah, I don't remember how high they got, but that was the last time.
Seems like 19 is the number that sticks in my brain.
Yeah,
and then the Copeland injury happened, right?
That all fell apart. Yeah,
Copeland injury was during the season, later in the season.
Yeah, they'd already kind of starting to slide. They just didn't have any depth, and they got exposed. Eventually, the starters started to wear down, and then Copeland got hurt, and they won 2 games in the Big Ten tournament somehow.
God, they had talent though. Roby and
that front line was as good as they've had since knee.
Roby, Palmer, Copeland,
Watson.
Wow. I mean, that's 3 dudes now.
But this game against Creighton, it's such a big opportunity for the program. It's in Lincoln, red out, kind of a no-sit Sunday type feel going into this game. It's going to be great. I mean, I'm so excited to take my family and watch this game and see the atmosphere. And if Nebraska can defend the perimeter game of Creighton, is because they're going to shoot a lot of threes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this is Nebraska for this game to be what it currently is. They had to take care of business for the first 7 games, and they did that. They certainly had some lulls, especially last time out against Cal State Fullerton, where they didn't look all that great, but they still won by 13. So they did what they were supposed to do. Now they've got some momentum, some confidence. They've got their lineup back, and so all these things that you wanted to check off leading up to this point, where the calendar flipped to December, Creighton comes to town, and then the high majors start rolling in. They've done it, and so now you got a game against Creighton where you're expecting a packed PBA. It's going to be probably a hornet's nest in there with the build-up and anticipation for this one, especially with what happened up in Omaha last year. There's a little bit of juice now. And then you add in what happened to Creighton, where Colorado State had their way with them.
Rocked them.
Held them to the lowest point since Nebraska last year. So
48, right?
It showed that, if you are physical and tough and can kind of dictate the pace and slow Creighton down and make life difficult for them on offense, you're going to have a chance to fluster them. Well, what did Nebraska do to Creighton last year? That exact blueprint. Yeah. What have they been doing to teams all season? That exact blueprint. Mm-hmm. So you look at the Ken Pom projections right now. They have Nebraska losing this game, but guess what? It's 73-72. It's a coin toss. Mm-hmm. 45%.
Has it ever been that close in a long time?
No, probably not. Maybe the 17-18 year or 18-19 year. I mean,
what's Creighton have point guard?
They have Ashworth kid,
that Utah State transfer, right?
Yeah,
which he's not. I mean, he's okay.
See, he's not Nemhard. When Creighton came in here with Nemhard, he controlled the game in PBA. It was it was a virtuoso performance in the second half, and I just thought the point guard was a difference. But if they don't have that, that helps. Nebraska, it helps Nebraska that they're old. I mean, Nebraska is an old team, bunch of just old guys that will handle this fine. I mean that Ken Pom projection to me is right on. I think it's a game that goes down the last few possessions.
When's the last time Nebraska beat Creighton 2 years in a row, Rob? I mean, are you going back to like 97, 98?
Maybe not that far. Because
I don't know.
I'd have to look.
I'm pretty sure
I don't have that readily available right now, but that's the thing. If Creighton's hitting their threes and they're playing with high tempo and that freedom of movement offense is clicking, there's not very few teams in the country that can compete with them. But Nebraska has the recipe that I think that can combat that with the physicality in which they play with and the pace that they're able to dictate. This will be a huge game for Jamarcus Lawrence. Now, he's gotten better and better every game that he's played. He's got a 12-0 assist to turnover ratio over the last 3 games. He has not turned the ball over once over his last 3 outings. This is a guy that never played point guard before until this season. So you're seeing that natural progression with him. And as a result, Nebraska's offense is really clicking. Over 80 points a game, every game this season.
Yeah, Rob, they have not. So the last time Nebraska beat Creighton 2 years in a row was 96 and 97. Wow. Or it was 95, 96, 96, 97. So that was right. I mean, because I remember the 98, 99 game. That's when Rodney Buford and Ryan Sears and Creighton had just kind of really got going. They made the tournament. They beat Louisville. And they beat Nebraska in the Civic. I was at that game.
At the Civic.
The Civic Auditorium.
Which is no longer. The Civic is no longer.
No.
I'll be darned, Sean. You have an incredible memory.
Well, we went to those. I went to those games.
I should remember this stuff, and I don't.
So Creighton's got a big one before that, too, where Nebraska's off until Sunday. Creighton's got to go to Stillwater and play Oklahoma State, who, they're top
3-3.
Top 100.
Yeah.
Ken Pom team.
That's a tough place to play, though.
Yeah. And so, and they're also coming off that, 21-point loss. So, they got to figure themselves out. So that's, again, opportunity is there. You look at, we're talking about Ken Pom rankings. Nebraska's 46 right now. It's pretty good. It's been a long time since they've been that high. And so this is, you could not ask for a better opportunity if you're in Nebraska for this Creighton game. And, looking ahead, too. You got Minnesota on the road as your first Big Ten road game. Next week, that's a winnable game. They're struggling right now, and they're kind of going through it a little bit. So that's an opportunity to go 1-0 in Big Ten. Then you got Michigan State at home.
Just okay.
They're struggling.
They're struggling.
And then you got a Kansas State team where they've kind of taken a step or two back from their run last year. So, I mean,
What's K-State ranked?
The table is set.
Not ranked.
They're not
in the Ken Pom. Like, where are they at in the Ken
They're
Pom?
41, so they're right there with Nebraska. They're right on par with Nebraska.
And that's one of those games. Like, will there be a big student presence at Bramlage? I would assume on a Sunday.
I would think for that game. I mean, they turn out well for basketball.
I mean, Kansas is obviously basketball in the state of Kansas is huge. And I mean, you watch those Kansas State games on like Big Monday.
Oh, yeah. It's alive. It's alive.
I'm just curious what kind of atmosphere that will be in Bramlage.
It'll be good.
It'll be a great atmosphere on Sunday.
I mean, it will be 16,000. It'll be it'll be the hardest Nebraska basketball ticket to get.
And Nebraska's already calling officially for a red out. So that hopefully means they're going to get the all red Nebraska jerseys versus the all blue Creighton jerseys. I love that combination.
All right.
Perfect.
Big day for Robin Washington, and we'll even get Steve Sipple in the arena.
I'll be there. Yeah, I wouldn't miss it.
All right. Well, make sure you follow Robin's coverage and Sip's column as well of Nebraska Creighton on Sunday. When we come back, Abby Barmore will join the show. We'll talk volleyball later with Abby, but we're going to hit questions in the mailbag next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. and Steve Sipple. Before we get into the mailbag, this segment of the program brought to you by who?
Larson Motors. Looking for a new vehicle? Go for a new experience at Larson Motors in Nebraska City. Larson Motors is one of the Midwest's only dealerships with all the major brands in one location. Finding your new Chevrolet, GMC, Hummer, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram has never really been easier. Start your new experience today at LarsonMotorGroup.com. That is LarsonMotorGroup.com or at Larson Motors in Nebraska City. Larson Motors, real people, real deals.
All right, let's get into the mailbag because we've got a lot to cover here, Abby. Where are we starting off at?
Are you surprised by the lack of Huskers on the all Big Ten defensive teams?
A little, but again, I was a voter, and it is really tough because you have to dictate stats and numbers and like ability, but also success on teams. And a lot of times, all conference teams, you lean towards more success. So like Michigan's a great one to look at because they hardly had to play any snaps this year because they blew everybody out. And they played a style of offense that held the football. So they didn't have to be on the field a lot.
So they didn't have great stats.
So none of their guys are going to have elite stats.
Mm-hmm.
But finally, the last 2 weeks, we've seen Jim Harbaugh, 3 weeks, his team kind of turn things loose with 3 pretty tough games against Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State.
I hope that voters poured over it like you did and not just looked at the stats and said, okay, here's the guys, because it isn't, stats can be really misleading. And you're right. If it's me, my tendency would be to look at the very top teams in the league, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Iowa. Look at their defenses and lean toward those guys. You'd have to be careful with that. But I bet they're well represented. They should be.
Yeah.
Because the Michigan's defense was, you saw it in Lincoln. What'd that look like to you?
Yep.
It looked like every guy in the team could be all Big Ten.
Did we say who Nebraska got on the All Big Ten?
Luke Gifford.
Luke Reimer was
sorry.
a third team All Big Ten by the coaches.
That's it.
So they had Reimer was a honorable mention by the media, Jamari Butler, Omar Brown, Isaac Gifford, Tommy Hill, Nash Hutmaker, Quentin Newsom, and Ty Robinson, surprisingly, were all honorable mentions.
Honorable mention. Ty came on a little late, right? He wasn't dominant early. His season got better as it progressed. He was playing his best football at the end. And if he would have played like that all the way through.
I'm saying, if I'm picking a Nebraska defender to be the lone representative on an all-conference team, it's Ty Robinson.
I had Ty Robinson in my 12.
In your 12 what?
You get to pick 12 D linemen.
Okay.
And I did have him in my 12.
Okay.
I put him in there. I don't want to get into like how I rank guys, but he made my 12.
But did he make it easily?
It would have been like, if he would have made it, it would have been third team.
Yeah.
Because again, like you're talking about some of the best teams in the country.
Absolutely.
Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State.
Yeah. Penn State's defense.
Those 3 teams are going to command 60 or in Iowa. They're Iowa. Those 3 teams are probably going to command 65% of the spots.
Right. And that's fair. Let's face it. That's fair.
And then
Penn State's defense is ridiculously talented.
Then you're going to have the spot players that make it, like Nubbin from Minnesota, great defensive back. Sure. Newton from Illinois.
Wohlers from Wisconsin.
Yeah, those are the guys. And then, Scorton from Purdue. I thought he was one of the best players all year.
Outside linebacker.
He was second team.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jenkins didn't make anything.
Yeah, those 2 guys, if people would just flash back to the Purdue-Nebraska game, those guys were very dominant in that game, numbers-wise, and just they showed up.
Well, their numbers were as high as anybody in the conference, but that's an example of their numbers weren't as respected in the big picture. But let's get into the next one. What do you got, Abby?
Will Nebraska pursue K-State quarterback transfer Will Howard?
Never say never, but the early tea leaves from On3's Pete Nakos already say that it's Louisville, it's Washington, it's Kentucky. Some other teams in
Missouri
there. Missouri was in there. No Nebraska.
Yeah, and he's also hasn't ruled out jumping to the NFL too.
Jeez.
So
look at the list of teams. This is what you're dealing with if you're Nebraska. It's a pretty impressive list.
Jeff Brom, Kellen DeBoer.
Yeah.
Yep.
The best 2 quarterback whisperers, arguably 2 of the best in the game.
It's complex. It's a complicated discussion. It's not going to be easy.
Like, if Kellen DeBoer and Jeff Brom say we can teach you and work with you to play quarterback, or do you want to come to Nebraska? Come on. It's the NIL, and the NIL thing doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like when you're talking about development and getting to the next level, what's another 50 or 100 grand?
No.
And even then, I don't think some of those guys, it's all about the money. I think it's about the best opportunity to develop to be a better player.
The short-term reward is often overshadowed by the long-term benefit. If you can get someone that can, for one, make you succeed to where you can have other opportunities to make money while you're in college, but then more importantly, get you groomed for the league and make a lot more money over the next 10 years, that's where it's going to win out.
All right. What do you got next, Abby?
What is something under the radar that surprised you the most about the Huskers this season, and what was the biggest disappointment in year one?
The big miss of Jeff Sims was my biggest surprise. Like,
Just
I just didn't expect it to be this wrong.
Something under the radar good was Ben Hart. I mean, I don't know Bryce Ben Hart. I don't know that any of us expected that Ben Hart would be the most highly graded player on offense.
The highest graded starter.
Yeah, highest graded starter, not on the offensive line, on the offense. I didn't necessarily see that coming. I didn't think he was a bad player, but I didn't see him being the most highly graded offensive player.
Yeah, the turnovers. I mean, just across the board. Quarterbacks, running backs, pretty much anybody that touched a football just couldn't hold on to it. I never in my wildest dreams would imagine 31 turnovers in 12 games. I mean, that's just a stunning number. And positive, pleasant surprise, Tommy Hill. I mean, he emerged as a lockdown corner. And this is a guy that got run off last year. So, I mean,
my feelings on Tommy Hill.
His resurgence is one of the bright spots.
It's interesting. It doesn't surprise me. I've just always thought he was a good player. I know he struggled last year, but
just where he was for his headspace.
Well, Travis Fisher is not a blow smoke kind of guy. And he was so high on Tommy Hill. And
he lost his way last year.
Well,
Georgia Southern really rocked him.
The whole defensive staff early last year lost its way, which led to the change to bring Bill. I mean, it was kind of a disaster the first 3 games of the 4 games of the season.
Yeah. Let's see. Disappointment for me, surprising disappointment. Something I didn't expect would probably be Buschini. How up and down he was. I would have expected that he would have had a very like an all Big Ten type season.
Yeah, I agree. He was among our top 5 punters when we ranked the Big Ten in the offseason.
I thought MJ Sherman would have done more.
Yeah, I could see that. He wasn't bad. He played a lot of snaps.
Wasn't bad, but like
I thought he was going to be a captain.
Javin Wright had a better year than MJ Sherman. Did you see that coming?
I didn't. But here's the thing. I like Sherman. I do like him. He's a big physical player. He's very, very intense. You can tell he's bought in. You're right. He didn't make the plays we probably anticipated, but I still like him as a player.
And Billy Kemp's numbers were probably half of what we thought they were going to be. A lot of it was the quarterbacks, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's face it. He's playing. Look at what we're just talking about. The defensive secondaries he's playing against. It's a little different than what he was facing in the ACC. It is.
Yeah, those guys are semi-trucks back there.
Yeah.
All right, what do you got, Abby?
He just got rocked.
It looks like we have time for one more.
Okay, final question. What is your favorite moment or play from this season, and one that you'll remember down the line?
Ooh. Two blocked field goals against Iowa. I always remember. That's rare.
What about the one that got returned for a touchdown?
The Quentin Newsome run back where they high-fived along the sideline.
There you go.
I don't know if it gets much better than that.
That doesn't. Good point. That's a good one.
One of the Purdue game, pretty much.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was an amazing time. That was an amazing moment.
The belly option touchdown where the rules pointing to Osborne and the skybox, like that was pretty good too.
The option pass.
Yeah.
To Malachi, the first belly G option pass. Yeah, that was a moment.
I know they lost both games, but just the stage Nebraska was on the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah,
national televised.
God, it was a
Colorado game.
At Minneapolis, then big noon kickoff Fox.
Intense.
I mean, the first 2 weeks, like Nebraska football was on as big of a stage as you could be on.
Intense. It was really intense.
And that's what's disappointing about the year, that they were given a great stage to catapult the rule era the first 2 weeks of the year.
Especially Minnesota. I'll remember that game just for a long time, and I forget a lot of them. I do. Sometimes I don't remember being at the games, but that game, they had it in the final 5 minutes. And we were saying, oh, they got this locked up. Then all of a sudden there was a pick, and then there was a fumble, and you're like, oh my God, you got to be kidding.
Well, and then we find out the guy that made that field goal, he was the all Big Ten kicker. I mean, that was not an easy kick they made to win the game.
Well, Tyler Newbin just changed the game.
So
turnovers.
Minnesota's 2 first-team all Big Teners, their kicker and their safety, beat Nebraska. I mean, they made the plays.
Nebraska, I would offer that Nebraska beat itself in that game.
Well, yeah, and then their best players though made the plays.
Yeah.
Where Nebraska, this is a team that doesn't have an all Big Ten player, a first teamer,
Good
second
point.
teamer.
That's a good point. We always talk about what gets teams over the top. One of the
Dudes.
leading things is when you have first team all Big Ten players to get you over the top.
Huskers haven't had a first team all Big Ten defender since 2014, Randy Gregory.
That is an amazing stat and very telling. That is very telling because that's what gets you over the top.
10 years.
She made Christmas,
All right.
Sean. No wonder that you're the publisher.
On that note, we're going to talk about a brighter spot in our day. Nebraska volleyball, #1 seed in the tournament. We'll get the full rundown from Abby Barmore next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. Final segment here of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, Abby Barmore. We're going to talk some Nebraska volleyball. But before we get to that, once again, we've got a great special for our YouTube listeners. Get not 1 month, get 2 months of Husker Online access for $1. That's the best deal you're going to get, and it's only being offered here on YouTube. So take advantage of that promo by using promo code NU1. That's promo code NU1 to receive 2 months, $4. Okay, let's get into it, Abby.
That's a good Christmas present, by the way.
Yeah. Merry Christmas for $1, Steve Sipple.
That's pretty damn good.
You're hooked up.
It's right in the budget.
It's like you once gave me that old Highway Diner gift card. I really appreciate it.
You're doing better than that.
You have an incredible memory.
Abby,
Abby,
Nebraska volleyball, #1 seed. And I think some key things that jumped out: Wisconsin, Texas, Stanford. They will not see those teams until the possible national championship. So as far as the draw goes, I mean, was it about as good as you were hoping for Nebraska?
Yeah, I think Nebraska got one of the best draws as a top seed. I mean, they have more of like an SEC flavor going for them, and Kentucky, who's the second seed in their section of the bracket, Nebraska swept them earlier this season, and the Wildcats have been getting better, but I don't think there's anyone that Nebraska should be scared to play. I think just in general, they could be anyone. The only team I kind of hesitate on is Wisconsin, just because of how they handled them last time. It was a definite beatdown in the third set. So
ouch.
Wisconsin hit 290. They hit 593 in the third set, which was, it bumped Nebraska down to number 3 in opponent hitting percentage for the first time all season. They led the country. So that was a big loss for them, but I also think it was important to get a loss out of the way so they don't have to worry about going undefeated anymore. And they did, bounce back and play a little more free against Minnesota, who also made the tournament. But yeah, the Huskers got a really good draw. And, after they, advance past this first and second rounds, they will either play Florida or Georgia Tech unless there's a big upset. And I think both of those teams are very doable, and it could be fun if the Huskers face Florida, because that's where Merritt Beeson transferred from. So there's a lot of storylines to watch here.
So you think Wisconsin's the second biggest threat to win it all, or do you think they're the biggest threat to win it all? Who's the biggest threat to win it all?
Stanford.
Who do you like?
I
Abby?
would say from what I've seen from like other media members, they've picked Wisconsin to beat Nebraska in the championship. And I might agree with that, but nobody fire me or anything.
Well, you're gonna get fired
Well, they've had Nebraska's number. I mean,
for a long time.
and it took like an incredible
For a long time.
scene for them to win in Lincoln this year.
Yeah, they had to win 5 sets. In the fourth and the fifth set were by 2 points. And the very final point was on a challenge. So everything had to go right for Nebraska. They just got really lucky, and they had 44 attack errors, which is unreal. Like, so not good.
What's normal? Like, what's a normal like Nebraska number?
Maybe like 27 to 32 range. Like, they knocked it out of the park with a lot of hitting errors, and they still found a way to win. So I think it does give them a little hope, especially if they have to see each other again. Like, they have done it. There is a way to do it. And Nebraska didn't play nearly their best. So this is a very high ceiling for this team, but I don't feel like recently that they're peaking, that they're playing the best that they could. They, at the beginning of the season, especially against Stanford, that was their best performance, in my opinion. Just as a whole, and that really set the tone for the whole season.
That got the number 1 seed if you really want to look at it. I mean, when you sweep Stanford in Palo Alto, I mean, that had to be like the ultimate bump right there for Nebraska.
Yeah, it was actually a 4-set win, but it was huge for this team, especially because the last, several seasons, I think last 3, Stanford beat them, and it was a very bad loss in Lincoln the time before, and they'd never beat Stanford on their home court before. So just that was a huge win for them. And of course, both teams, I think, have grown a lot and learned a lot since then. If they were to meet again, it would be a very different matchup, and Nebraska's found more of a rhythm and they know who they are. So,
and Wisconsin has Purdue, Penn State, and Marquette all on their side of the bracket, right? I mean,
they might not even make it there.
I mean, they have to go through teams that have played them already.
Yes, and Penn State and Purdue beat them. Both of them did.
And they played Marquette to it. Was that a sweep, or was that a close match?
I want to say 5 sets. That was a close one.
And that's a rival. That's their Creighton. I mean, that Marquette is the Creighton of Wisconsin.
And
showing some depth over there.
I could be wrong, but I think that was a huge that was a huge crowd. And didn't they play it like in the Bucks?
Yeah.
Where the Bucks play?
God, yeah.
Was that the record? Well, that would have been a record.
That was the indoor record.
Okay.
I think they set another indoor record after they had the previous one. So, those 3 teams are huge. And I heard that the locker room, when Nebraska's name was announced, they're excited. But when they heard that Penn State was in Wisconsin's bracket, there was a bigger cheer. So that is important. But also during those 2 losses for Wisconsin to Penn State and Purdue, one of their best players, Anna Schmeck, was out, and that was huge. They changed around their whole lineup. So that's something to watch now, and she's back, and she's doing very well.
Who's the biggest threat in Nebraska's region, and who's your Final Four, and who's your champion?
Good grief.
We're going to hold you to all this, Abby.
Yep.
Okay,
Come on,
here
Abby.
it is.
Make your picks.
Okay, the biggest threat, I'm going to go with Kentucky because not only are they the number 2 seed, but they've gotten a lot better and they've figured it out. And and they have like really good players. They might have had like 5 players on the all-conference team. But when Nebraska played them, even though it was a sweep, John Cook was like, I think they're going to win the SEC. That is a really good team.
And they won the SEC.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be the biggest one.
Final Four
for them. And then the Final Four, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Stanford, and then I don't.
So 3 ones.
Maybe.
Just go with 4 ones, Abby.
Well, I don't. The interesting one, I'm pretty sure, like the bottom left bracket, it has Pitt and Louisville, and they are like conference foes, and they split the conference. Like they have each beat each other 1 time, so I think it might come down to those 2.
Okay.
Creighton and Louisville could square off in a Sweet 16 match. That'll be an interesting match, and you've got some familiarity there with the coaches, obviously with Danny Busboom Kelly and Kristen Booth.
And also that second round could be Creighton and Minnesota, which would be
that's a wild second
really
round
good
game.
a really good match, but also a tough draw for Creighton for sure.
And they're hosting in Omaha, correct?
Yes, correct.
Gosh, never take for granted that what we're talking about here, that it would be a shocking development if Nebraska doesn't make the Final Four. And it's not always going to be like that. It just can't be. I mean, we've learned it in football. Don't take it for granted.
And they'll host in the 3rd and 4th round, and then the Final Four is in Tampa. And you have to think that there are just thousands of Nebraska fans that will migrate to Tampa.
Yes,
100.
and I know a lot of media members that have already booked their plane tickets and their hotels. Actually, after Nebraska beat Wisconsin, everyone's like, well, book your flights. We're going to Tampa.
Interesting.
So, it will be a shock if they don't make it to the Final Four.
That's amazing to say that about a program.
I expect them to make the championship as well.
Well, it should be fun. Abby's going to have full coverage throughout the weekend. Regionals will be in Lincoln. The Huskers play Friday and Saturday, correct, Abby?
Yes, sir.
7 o'clock both nights.
Yes.
So
Abby, did you say who's winning it? Who's a champion?
I think it'll be Nebraska, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And call it.
I mean, if you want to pick Wisconsin,
call
you
it.
Pick Wisconsin.
I
It's
mean,
fine. You're not the only one.
I
lean
think it might
Wisconsin.
be. I lean Wisconsin for sure, but I feel like once there's so much at stake, hopefully both teams is what you always want. Will play their best. In Nebraska, they haven't gotten to play their best in a while now, so
Okay.
hopefully they can find a way to peak. And John Cook is very good at getting
guys,
his teams to peak at the right time.
That's on ABC this year, the finals.
Wow.
Yeah,
So-
on Sunday.
We'll get a true television rating barometer. It's one thing to put the final on ESPN or ESPN2. You throw that puppy on the 3-letter ABC. We'll see what that does compared to the basketball. Now, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese was a phenomenon, but what will it do ratings wise pre-Caitlin Clark game for volleyball? Because we've seen what it did on ESPN, and it could put up a huge number of Nebraska, Wisconsin. I'm sure ABC's rooting for that final.
It'll definitely cap off a big year of setting world records and attendance records across all the volleyball sports at every level.
Well, thank you, Abby, and looking forward to your coverage this weekend.
Thanks, guys.
All right. That wraps it up here for this week's edition of the Husker Online Show. We'll have Husker on the headlines as well later this week, as Steve Sipple and I will recap the week. We'll hear from Coach Rule Wednesday, so we'll have more from Coach Rule as well. So it should be a lot to stick with on HuskerOnline.com. For Abby Barmore, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, I'm Sean Callahan.